So, first of all, thanks to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people nations for hosting us here in downtown Vancouver. I am from the south of Brazil, the land of the Mbia Guarani, one of which was one of my ancestors. And thank you for the kind invitation for me to speak here today. Thanks to Janice Morris, to all the organizers, and to the volunteers of the KDocs Film Festival 2023 edition. And thank you, of course, all of you for being here. Congratulations on the festival, and thanks for bringing to Vancouver an impressive lineup of documentaries on important topics that affect us all. I'm here to introduce TheTerritory, the 2022 documentary directed by Alex Pritz about the Uruauau Nation's indigenous territory in the Brazilian Amazon rainforest. I'll say a few words about the context, partly from a paper that I co-wrote with my friend Kim Bushen called Utopian Ecologies, Amazonia as Environmental Futurity, to be published later this year. The Amazon rainforest, pre-conquest, before the invasion, may have been home to millions of indigenous peoples from different cultural traditions and languages, living from the land and waters, taking only what they needed without greed. The Amazon rainforest is home to 2.7 million indigenous people, 9% of the region's population, representing 350 ethnic groups. According to the Brazilian Institute for Society, Nature and Population, in Brazil, there are nearly 900,000 indigenous people who speak 274 languages, half of which live in the Amazon forest. The Amazon breathes our precious oxygen, and the survival and well-being of Earth depends on the survival of this region and of the indigenous communities who call the Amazon home in all their cultural diversity. Much has been discussed over the progressive dangers of destroying the Amazon forest, and for good reason. The statistics are dire. According to Brazil's Institute for Space Research, a new record has been hit in the first half of 2022, with 8,590 square kilometers cleared from January to September, equal to an area 11 times the size of New York City, and up to 22.6% from the previous year. It is well known that during Jair Bolsonaro's disastrous term as president, criminal activities such as land grabbing, cattle ranching, illegal logging, mining, and fishing all accelerated the partial destruction of the Amazon, nearly reaching a tipping point. More specifically, a total of 45,586 square kilometers was lost, a 53% increase compared to the previous 4 years. This was between 2012 and 2018. According to Greenpeace, affecting not only lost vegetation and animals, but also displacing indigenous peoples and jeopardizing their livelihood. Brazil is clearly not the only nation affected by the situation, since the Amazon region in Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Bolivia, and other countries is also in peril. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic brought new challenges to multiple indigenous communities, evidencing our era as marked by multiple ecological, health, social, and cultural crises affecting Amazonian indigenous communities. Many of you also know that during Bolsonaro's dreadful presidency, the Yanomami nation suffered mass deaths due to famine and forced displacement from their demarcated territory because of illegal mining and subsequent water contamination. Bolsonaro revoked protective laws banning illegal mining and dismantled protective measures and agencies, among many other deregulations in the region, reversing work of decades to demarcate and protect indigenous territories in the Amazon, land that was stolen from them in the first place, of course, through colonization. The ultra-right authoritarian presidency that just ended promoted the legal infantilization or the flat-out dehumanization of indigenous populations, perpetrating colonial justifications for exploitation of resources and of indigenous territories, even questioning indigenous rights to citizenship, in the words of Bolsonaro, because they don't even speak Portuguese. I quote, "Unfortunately, there are still extremist politicians in the Brazilian Congress who promote genocidal ideologies, mostly associated to the agribusiness and mining." Nevertheless, things have started to change. In the last month, when re-elected President Lula created the new Ministry of Indigenous People, with Sônia Guajajara, an indigenous woman, as its first minister. Guajajara, together with a team of indigenous members, will implement measures including land demarcation and hopefully the guarantee of sovereignty and indigenous rights. Lula also revived the Brazilian agency FUNAI, or National Foundation for Indigenous Peoples, and for the first time in history, appointed an indigenous person as its president, Joênia Wapichana, an indigenous woman. I would like to point out that indigenous activism in Brazil is historically directly related to environmental and conservation efforts, as well as to human rights and to the rights of nature. And the current government's promise is that it will enable several generations of indigenous activists united to fight for their rights. As we mourn ongoing losses and recover from the past 4 years, it is time to rebuild and strengthen efforts. The territory is an example of such initiatives. The Uruauau, or Japau Nation, featured in the film, was uncontacted until the 1980s. Their already small population first decreased upon contact, then increased again after surviving contaminations, illegal tin mining, logging, and land grabbing. Applying a combination of leadership, activism, and technology, the members of this community act as agents of their own resistance to maintain sovereignty. The territory also demonstrates the intricacies of power relations, landowners' stronghold over laborers and wage workers, and how the wealthy elite pits poor settlers against indigenous communities as though they are competing for living standards, typically evading the responsibility of politicians, business people, and of those on top. The film discusses and shows processes that may be described as multi-leveled top-down manipulations with dangerous consequences. The Territory is an example of a documentary that reflects on many facets of a delicate and urgent situation, questioning and hopefully challenging social-political power imbalances. It is a USA, UK, Brazil, and Denmark co-production, and yet I see in it indications of Uruauau agency and a deep reflection on the ethics of representation and the action of self-representation, with footage shot by the Uruauau and with Tangai Uruauau as co-cinematographer. As a social justice documentary film festival, KDocs aims towards student and community engagement, and the Territory is an excellent example of the complexities of film as political tool. The film informs, reflects, and possibly persuades. What's different here are the rules of engagement with us, the public. It offers multiple points of views, but where are we in this equation? How may we here in Canada empathize with and understand what is happening in South America, in the Amazon, one of the largest biodiversities on Earth and one of the largest cultural diversities on Earth? How could we, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, establish relationships with each other and with the Amazon and its dwellers? Where are the bridges between North and Global South waiting to be built? How may we learn about Canada's responsibility on mining and logging in the Amazon? Because they are there. How may we actually understand that endless greed combined with a tremendous disregard for living things leads to drastic economic disparity, which then leads to the poor being complicitous with games played by the elite in power, and of course leads to climate and social emergencies? How may we act and ensure the end of a variety of genocides? The Uruauau and other indigenous communities are incredibly resourceful, and there is a clear connection between indigenous knowledge, biodiversity, and the preservation of our beautiful planet Earth. But them and all other indigenous communities do not deserve to be responsible for rebuilding alone after the devastation of colonial burdens. They deserve independence, respect, and dignity. To conclude, shaman and activist Davi Kopenawe Nanomami tells us that the forest is alive, and that the forest is the flesh and skin of our earth, and that we must all protect it. Sonia Guajajara tells us that ancestrality teaches us the meaning of life. The meaning of life is in collectivity. I hope this documentary invites you to reflect and to find your own place in the world through solidarity. Thank you.